the city where stones flew. What if the only believable explanation for an ancient construction project is that it should have been physically impossible? A legend among the islanders of Micronesia tells of two sorcerer brothers, Olisipa and Olosopa, who sailed in from a distant land searching for a place worthy of their gods. According to the oldest versions of the story, the brothers first attempted to build their temple on the western side of the island and failed. Only after searching further did they find the shallow reef on the eastern coast, the place we now call Nan Madol. And there, the legend says, their magic finally worked. They didn't carry the stones, they made them fly through the air using magic, the power of a dragon, and spells long since forgotten. This, according to tradition, is how the walls of the city local people call the spaces between were built, Nan Madol. Scientists, of course, don't believe in flying stones. The problem is, they still can't offer an explanation that's much more believable. Nan Madol sits on a shallow coral reef off the coast of Pohnpei Island, right in the heart of the Pacific Ocean. A place so remote that even reaching it today, with modern transportation, isn't easy. Nearly 100 artificial islets, connected by a network of tidal canals, earned the city its nickname, the Venice of the Pacific. But Venice was built from wood and stone sourced nearby. Nan Madol was built from basalt, a heavy volcanic rock that naturally cools into hexagonal columns, like enormous stone pencils. And here's the mystery. The nearest deposits of this basalt sit on the opposite side of the island, many kilometers from the construction site, across both land and open water. The total weight of basalt used in building Nan Madol is estimated at hundreds of thousands of tons. Individual columns reach 6 meters in length. The heaviest blocks weigh up to 50 tons, roughly the weight of an adult blue whale. The builders had no wheel in the sense we're used to. No draft animals capable of pulling that kind of weight, since none ever existed on Pacific Islands. No metal tools. All they had was wood, rope made from plant fiber, stone tools, and judging by everything we know, extraordinarily advanced seafaring skill. How did these people lift, move, and stack hundreds of thousands of tons of stone to build artificial islands out in the middle of an open reef? The first European to document the site was a British ship surgeon named Dr. Campbell, sailing aboard a vessel called the Lambton in 1836. By his own account, he had grown used to the modest boats, tools, and dwellings of the islands he'd already visited. Nothing prepared him for what rose out of the water at Pohnpei. When he asked the local population how such a place had come to exist, the language barrier left him frustrated and empty-handed. Whatever answer they gave him, it wasn't one a 19th century European mind was equipped to accept. Construction of Nan Madol is linked to the Saudeleur dynasty, which ruled Pohnpei starting around the 11th century CE and which held power over the entire island for roughly 500 years, an extraordinarily long reign for a single line of rulers in the Pacific. Recent research using coral dating has helped archaeologists pin down more precisely when the monumental construction began, and confirmed that the central, most impressive part of the complex, a tomb structure called Nandauwas, was completed by the 13th century. The engineering itself follows a technique UNESCO describes as header-stretcher, alternating layers of stone, some laid lengthwise, some laid crosswise, locking each course into the one beneath it. It's the same basic logic modern brick masons still rely on today, just executed at a scale involving stones the size of small cars. One of the leading researchers who studied the site directly compared it to the Egyptian pyramids, not in appearance, but in the very nature of the mystery. The construction didn't help the society grow more food or become fairer. It served no practical purpose. Its only function was to demonstrate power. And the more impossible the task appeared, the more convincing that demonstration became. The leading theory most researchers lean toward involves rafts. The peoples of Micronesia were renowned for exceptional seafaring skill, building outrigger canoes capable of crossing vast stretches of open ocean, navigating by the stars and currents without a single instrument. It's reasonable to assume the same master builders could have constructed rafts sturdy enough to keep multi-ton stone columns afloat, and towed them through shallow water to the construction site. But there's a weak point in this theory that rarely gets said out loud. A raft capable of supporting a 50-ton block would have to be an enormous structure in its own right, and no evidence of such vessels has survived in Micronesian culture at all. No depictions, no oral traditions, not the faintest technical description. Researchers assume rafts probably existed mainly because the alternatives seem even less likely, not because any actual proof has ever been found. Another theory suggests the stones were rolled on palm log rollers, the way some other ancient cultures moved massive blocks. But this runs into its own problem. A significant part of the route between the quarry and the construction site doesn't run over land at all. It crosses open water, a coral reef, lagoons, channels between islets. Log rollers simply don't work there. It's worth remembering that construction of Madol stretched across several centuries. This wasn't a single grand building project. It was a long, continuous process. Generation after generation of Pohnpei's people carrying on their father's work, quarrying, transporting and stacking stone, knowing full well they'd never live to see it finished. To grasp the scale, it helps to walk the site the way archaeologists have. The complex spans roughly 1.5 kilometers by half a kilometer, encompassing a seawall, canals wide enough for canoes to pass through, an irrigation system, residential quarters, ceremonial platforms, tombs, and even what researchers believe functioned as a prison. Watchtowers once stood at key points along the canals, positioned to spot any approaching threat from the open water. Every part of it, from the humblest residential platform to the towering walls of Nandawas, rests on an artificial foundation built directly on top of a living coral reef. That last detail raises its own separate question archaeologists still debate. Why go through the trouble of building on water at all? Dry land existed nearby on Pohnpei itself. Whatever the answer, it likely had less to do with practicality and everything to do with symbolism, isolation, and control, keeping the ruling class physically and spiritually separated from everyone else on the island. This place also carries a darker, far less romantic chapter of history, one that has nothing to do with ancient mysteries and everything to do with the recent past. In the early 20th century, rumors reached the island's residents about treasure hidden inside Madol's burial structures. Divers who dared to break into one of the underwater tombs did indeed find something valuable: platinum, a metal that had suddenly become far more important than the island's traditional exports of copra and vanilla. But local people had warned for centuries that disturbing the house of the dead would bring down a curse from the spirits guarding the site. Shortly after that expedition to the burial vaults, 2 members of the group vanished without a trace. Whether that was coincidence or not is something everyone can decide for themselves. But archaeologists working the site since then admit they find remarkably few artifacts left to study, as if whoever searched there before them either carried everything away or decided never to come back. The isolation of Madol has in some ways worked in its favor. Unlike many famous archaeological sites overrun by millions of visitors each year, Pohnpei receives only a trickle of tourism, largely due to how difficult the island still is to reach. Getting there typically means catching a small regional flight that island hops across the Pacific, stopping at the Marshall Islands before finally landing on Pohnpei itself. From the island's main town, it's roughly a 90-minute drive before the ruins even come into view. That remoteness has spared the site from the kind of foot traffic and souvenir hunting that has worn down other ancient wonders, but it has also meant the ruins receive far less scientific attention and funding than sites of comparable importance elsewhere in the world. Today, Madol is listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, official recognition that what stands here isn't just picturesque ruins, but one of the most significant archaeological monuments in the entire Pacific region. But recognition isn't the same as an explanation. The mechanism by which hundreds of thousands of tons of stone ended up here remains just as unsolved today as it was a century ago, when a European explorer first stumbled onto these walls, and according to the records, never got a clear answer from the local population, whether because of the language barrier or because no answer that would have satisfied a European actually existed. Maybe the point isn't that the legend of flying stones is literally true. Maybe it's that the legend was the only way people without writing, in the sense we're familiar with, could pass down across generations the feeling of something for which ordinary words simply didn't exist, an achievement so far outside everyday experience that it never fit into any rational explanation available to the storyteller. What if the most incredible legends aren't an attempt to deceive, but the only language available for describing something that defies ordinary explanation?